Hello there, I'm Nick, and this is the Game Apologist, where we look for the good in bad games. Or, sometimes sequels that nobody talks about. It feels like every few years I think to myself, I wonder whatever happened to Medieval. And then conveniently enough, Sony pops out another remake, or throws them into PlayStation All-Stars. And it seems fitting that the latest remake has a demo, as that's all I ever played of the original for the longest time. It's not like I hated the game, it's quite the opposite. It's one of the games I really wanted to like. And I don't know why I never got the full game as a kid, but if I had to guess, well, games were limited to presents, so you had to choose carefully. But eventually, I did buy the game, and just a few years ago, finally played it through and beat it. And it was okay. It was pretty good. The Nightmare Before Christmas style still shines through even with these aged PS1 graphics. The witty-britty humor is still as charming as ever, and the levels are memorable and mostly well-designed. Mostly. Outside of the charm, though, gameplay just isn't as solid as some of the other standouts of this era. Still, it's considered a staple of the classic PlayStation lineup. Not enough to show up on the PlayStation Mini, but, well, enough of a classic to be remade. Twice. We had Medieval Resurrection on the PSP, which, again, is fine, and it looks like this PS4 remake will be a perfectly fine time if the demo is anything to go off of. But outside of these occasional attempts to bring this series back from the dead, you rarely see any love for the sequel. Medieval 2 came out in the year 2000, and only in the year 2000. Never got a PSP remake, and even with this new remake coming out, Look, Dan, I love you, buddy, but I don't see this game making enough waves to warrant another shot at the second game. It's not even on the PSN store. The only way to play this in any legitimate capacity is on the original PlayStation, and you have to wonder why. Sir Dan is no Mario, but he's not an unknown quantity. Medieval is not exactly a hidden gem, so why no love for the second game? Well, in part, it might be because Medieval didn't exactly need a sequel. Dan was a false hero who came back from the dead, earned his place among the Hall of Heroes, and saved the land of the living from the original evil that felled him in the first place. The entire story of Galomir and his arc as a character all play out through this one game and wraps up pretty neatly. But a satisfying conclusion don't mean 1 inch of dog dingus when compared to money. Since the first game did well financially, Sony got their Cambridge studio on for a second game before the end of the PlayStation's life cycle. So let's take a look at what they came up with and see if we can figure out why this game seems to go unnoticed when talking about this cherished series. Okay, so the first thing we notice about Medieval 2 is it takes place in Victorian-era London. So already the title of the game makes no sense. Good job. I only picked up this game because I really enjoyed my time with Dan and Galomir. They did a wonderful job of building that world of Medieval and giving a sense of history and identity all of its own. Dropping all of that in favor of London feels like it's taken all the creativity and shoving it out the door. But my initial concerns aside, I'm actually down with this idea. Like I said, they wrapped up Dan's tale pretty nicely, and it makes sense to take this new tale somewhere else and go nuts with whatever new locations and narrative they come up with. So when Dan woke up in a museum as opposed to his crypt, I was just as confused as he was, but eager to explore my new surroundings. And there's also this little Cockney ghost around. So I don't know what his story is, but you got a dead kid hovering around through your new adventure, so have fun with that. I just love all the little details in this first level. Since this is a museum that takes place in Victorian-era London, they fill it with false facts, fun little Easter eggs from the first game, dinosaur skeletons that are not exactly put together correctly, and stone boobies! Is that okay? So rendered nips are just fine as long as they're supposed to be statues. Got it. Don't demonetize me, YouTube! The ESRB said this was okay! So going through the flow of things, this feels pretty close to the first Medieval. It's been a couple years since I played it, but so far so good. But once you beat this awesome dinosaur boss, we're brought into the professor's lab, the main hub of the game. And I know this is a weird thing to whine about, but something I notice every now and then in a game sequel is this supporting cast that we've never had to deal with before. I kind of enjoyed my solitude in the first game, and even as a kid I was already sick and tired of these tropey little nobodies coming in and out of nowhere and talking to me like I was watching Nick Jr. I'm just a cranky old man complaining about nothing. These guys are fine. It's what? Huh? But Dan, what's wrong with your voice? What on earth is this? What is with that weird voice? They couldn't get the original guy to come in and grunt into the mic for a few minutes? Again, all right, look, I understand the vocal choice. Look at that weird little head of his. I can understand why they went with a voice that sounds like a character from a Monty Python skit as opposed to a different character from a Monty Python skit, but I miss those angry little grunts.
Get on with it!
Again, I'm complaining about nothing. They went back to the old vocal stylings in the remake, so whatever. It's not like the original game's Dan was about to win any awards for that performance, so let's keep going. At this point, you meet the professor, who explained that someone got a hold of Zarok's spellbook and has been causing all kinds of naughty business, and it's up to you to set it right. From here, we head off to Kensington, which feels just as confusing as the town level from the first game. In fact, you'll probably see a lot of parallels between the two games in terms of levels, but here they feel a little bit more expansive, and a lot of the time, pretty confusing. Every level has you solving puzzles, which can fall anywhere between clever and nonsensical. Not proud to admit it, but I had to look up a guide a couple of times just to figure some things out. Not super often, and mostly just to find the location of some things, but still something I would prep for when playing this game. I remember the town level being fairly confusing in the first game, and you have at least a few levels just like that in the sequel. And look, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time with each level in this video, but I still want to point out the diversity between the stages. We started off in a museum, then we go into a town, and then we find an excuse to pop into an Egyptian-themed level, which also leads to boobies! Undead boobies! That's right, they've sexualized a corpse. Hopefully that didn't wake up too many dark feelings in children. So obviously this is meant to be a love interest to Dan, and
I don't normally approve of any old waif or stray, but when they're as pretty as this one, I think we could make exceptions. Interesting. I'll analyze this and see if I can't debrief our friend over here. Shut it down! Shut it down!
video game! What are you doing? No! They did not just do a close-up shot of a mummified tuchus! Professor! That lady is dead! You keep your meaty little metal fingers to yourself! What is wrong with you? This game is taking a bold stance on necrophilia. Let's see what else they get up to. It's about this point in the game I'm starting to notice the difficulties ramping up and getting a little irritating. In this particular case, just one stupid smack can send you into a nearby body of water, and that eats up an entire life bottle. The rest of the level can be quite a chore trying to find what keys go where and fighting giant mechanical elephants, and look, like I said, not going through every single level. Point is, frustration started to kick in for me here, and near the end of the game, I wanted to murder everything. See, while they did improve some things here and there, my major issues from the first game are still pretty prominent, and unfortunately, it comes down to the basic mechanics. You dip in water, you lose a life bottle. Fall from too high a ledge, same story. And that would be a little more forgivable if the controls were just a little bit tighter. The combat basically consists of flailing around your weapon until the enemy falls. I know there's a shield involved, but I didn't really see a need for the thing outside of some very specific instances. It's not intuitive, it's not fun, and neither is the platforming, which is everywhere in the endgame. Yeah, it's still as problematic as ever and super essential in the later levels of the game. Paired that with a camera that just feels like doing its own thing in the middle of a critical moment, and look, I know it's standard for a game to step up the challenge as it carries on, and I'm complaining about a game that's nearly 20 years old, but there were plenty of other games that had this nonsense figured out already. And they did a pretty solid job most of the way through with the weapon variety, if you happen to grab the chalices, and they keep Dan grounded for a good chunk of the first part of the adventure. And while the carnival was a challenge, things didn't get truly stressful until I got to the botanical gardens where I had to— oh God! Where I had to meticulously jump from tree branches or hope that Dan would figure out to climb down a freaking ladder, and that continues on through the rest of the levels, but I didn't have to restart too many times, and, well, I got through it. It was okay. But then we get to the final level, and I just about lost it. Now keep in mind, I have collected every chalice at this point, and the game has given me super armor, a Gatling gun, the works. And I'm still, oh boy. All of the complaints I'm mentioning, fidgety controls, sloppy combat, garbage camera. Yeah, it's all ready to make sure you leave this game hating its guts. But what made this level such a nightmare at the beginning was one of my last major issues with this game. It is so stingy with health. Okay, so to replenish health, you can get energy vials, which get you back a tiny chunk of health, or a life bottle, which permanently adds another bar to your overall health, very handy, and these little energy fountains, which never replenish. Yeah, even if you replay levels, these never come back. Oh, and you don't regain health between levels. Yeah, so if you're like me and down to the very last chunk of your life, little gold, and pretty short on ammo, yeah, this last level is going to be a pretty bad time. The only thing you can do at this point is to go back to a previous level, find the stupid little energy vials, and beat the level in its entirety. So you have to go back and play through these levels over and over again just to have enough health just to lose it all to these these stupid statues that have fire that shoves you over the edge of the building because I guess setting me ablaze wasn't good enough for you, game. And you have to kill all these horrible little gargoyles and not get hit by whatever this cauldron is spilling out on you, so you better make sure you have a charged shield on hand, and then you finally get inside, and it's just nothing but bad platforming. I can't even look at this footage. Oh man. This section would be a simple little nothing in any other platformer. And here, it's the hardest portion of the game. But I fought my way through, and even after a couple of game overs, I made it to the last boss. And you better have plenty of ammunition handy, because if you don't, well, this is going to be an even longer, more frustrating battle. But I got through it, and I beat the game. Dan reunites with his lady. They beat the bad guy who cares who he is? Who cares? They hop on the time machine, which, it was a whole thing. It doesn't matter. And then where are we going exactly? Where I guess we go back to Gallimere, where we're greeted with, oh my god! Wait, hey, what was that? That was a jarring ending. What does that mean? Did I do something wrong? That can't be right. There has to be more to this. Okay, let's hop online and see. There's okay, there are two endings. I apparently got the bad ending. To get the good ending, you can't collect the Gatling gun. So let me see if I understand this correctly. The reward you get for getting all of the chalices gives you the bad ending. So collecting chalices is actually a bad thing. So I just went to all this trouble, had to repeat these entire levels. I went back to levels to get those chalices, video game. What are you talking about? What is this even? Ah! Alright, so the fan base is debating on which of the two endings is actually canon. But seeing them both back to back, the Gatling-free ending seems way more fitting and conclusive. Normally, I don't want to spoil the end of games on my show, and I did leave out some plot points if you care enough to play it through yourself, but there was no way I couldn't talk about this two-ending nonsense. That final boss was hard enough with the Gatling gun, and it would have been nice to know that I didn't have to bother with the chalices, even if they were established to unlock the good ending in the first game, but hey, no big deal, game, you do you. So, yeah, I didn't like that last level. Most of my complaints ultimately come down to how the game is played. The controls haven't aged well, the camera hasn't aged well, the combat has not aged well. And that's why I hope it gets a remake. See, despite my frustrations, this is still a good game, one with some really clever ideas. I love the variety in levels and weaponry, and I would love to see what modern systems can do with the likes of the Freak Show and Botanical Garden level, and this super freaky rendition of Jack the Ripper. Game, you understand that was a real person who actually killed people, right? Not a giant Freddy Krueger one. Whatever, I'm getting off track. I actually enjoyed the game despite my screaming. I loved some of the puzzles, and the ones I had frustrations with would probably do better with updated mechanics. And that Dan hand mechanic actually played really well. I know I didn't talk about it at all until this point, but it doesn't really show up until halfway through the game, and it's only useful a handful of times. Thank you. Just real quick, this actually is a lot of fun when you get used to it. They come up with some clever puzzles and give Dan a unique perspective on the environment. I really feel like they could have expanded on this if a third game was ever made, but for what we have, it was pretty fun. But the data mechanics hold this game back, and they were probably an issue even when the game first came out in the year 2000. This was right before the PS2, and developers knew how to handle physics in games like this at this point. That's why I feel it deserves a remake. I mean, good for us for getting a Final Fantasy VII remake. I'm gonna play it, I'm probably gonna have a good time, but we didn't really need it. I mean, they're going out of their way to completely change it. And at some point you have to wonder, well, why are you bothering to redo it at all? But here in Medieval 2, you have a chance to take a good game and turn it into a great game. You take all of that charm, art design, and mechanics and update them for the modern day. The little I played of the first game's remake seems to understand the shortcomings and improve where it can. The combat is still a little flaily, but it's certainly better, and I can finally implement the shield in a way that makes sense. The movement feels good, and I have way more control over his jumps, and the camera isn't at war with me when I'm trying to navigate the world. Medieval 2 still improves from the original and from a lot of other games in that era, but playing it today, you can see it still had a long way to go. That said, there's still plenty to enjoy, and look, if things get too rough, yeah, cheat menus exist. Judge me all you want. I'm not playing that museum level 20 times just to get some energy vials. I have things to do. Despite my complaints, this is still a gem of a game that really deserves more attention in a series that, well, just deserves more attention in general. There are so many good ideas that came out from the PS1 era of games, and when it comes to Medieval 2, this certainly deserves a second chance among the living. Until next time, toot toot, skeleton warriors.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight. Spooky, scary skeletons speak with such a screech. You'll shake and shudder in surprise when you hear these zombies shriek.